Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whatever time it may be that you see fit to ingratiate us and indulge in the topics that we are challenged with today. I am joined by the one and only Mike Jones and the Dr. Charles Alexander. And we are waiting Charlie Parker. He says he's on the way, and we are looking forward to seeing him soon. He'll come in horn in hand, blaring, I'm sure. But we have several discussions. We've had almost spirited conversations. It is apparently Pick on Shelby Day on if you know, you know, on in the green room where we've had an incredible discussion about uh, times of antiquity. And so,
Larry,
yeah,
it's like they used to say about the Dream Team. You didn't want to see him play. What you really wanted to do was see him practice.
you are
Okay,
not lying. You are not lying because
where they
Dr.
was playing each other. Okay.
That that's for sure. Because Mike Jones just put on a graduate course, actually a graduate curriculum, and yeah, Charles Alexander co-signed everything. I have one issue, but like I said, it's Pick Up Shelby Day, and if you know, you know. But anyway, we are going to start today with I think, a sobering look at something that I have been um, essentially churning over and been a foundational thought of my work and my moves and even my studies. Ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, we are in the third Reconstruction, as Dr. Alexander pointed out earlier today, and we want to open up discussions. So I like for you all to chime in at your leisure and identify what we're looking at, what we're doing, and let's try and figure out what we need to be doing.
Larry, I agree with
All right, go right ahead.
Larry. I said I agree with that construct that this is like, let's call it the third Reconstruction. I think what that requires us to do, though, is not look at America the way the white um, the white narrative is for America. That America is on this trajectory of getting better over time. It struggles with it. It gets better over time. And
Mike, let me interject this.
yeah,
I think the concept is inevitability. We think things are going to get better inevitably without any.
right. And I would say the moment we experience it is part of the cyclical reoccurrence of American history. That the Donald Trump MAGA America is endemic. It's in it's in the cultural DNA of this country and this society from the day it was founded. And so while there may be some movement forward, it always creates the negative reaction to go back to where the country was started and founded. So I think how we get it twisted for ourselves is we buy into white America's theory of America and don't articulate a black theory of America that serves us. So it's kind of what we really were talking about in the green room. We're all looking at the same thing, but we see different stuff. So
And say,
what
and see,
and that's the key. So the question is, what do we see? Not what we're looking at, but what do we see?
I think we talk about origin stories on this show a lot, but we do not talk about nor relate as a community origin stories and myths to our own. And so we adopt it, of course, and we are fed the European origin story, which is totally false, but most myth stories are embellished anyway.
Right.
Well,
Well,
that's what they are. That's what they are.
they're all ahistorical.
Right.
Okay, they're not even designed to be historically accurate. They're metaphors for something.
as with ours.
Yeah, as with ours, because ours would be a metaphor too, but it'd be our metaphor. Okay, Larry, you okay?
No, I wasn't speaking.
Okay.
I am waiting comments from Dr. Alexander on the subject.
On the Reconstruction part of it.
On the Reconstruction part of it, of course, but also I think that well, I shouldn't say I think your analysis on these myths is very important, and I think, and we have done. I just completed a book, and I'll pull it a little later, where the author talks about just the very thing that you all are speaking about today, how important these myths are, and the fact that the foundational, and the reason why she goes back 3,000 years. 5,000 years is because the European myths are found on nothing but complete lies, but we believe those and we fail to provide our own myth stories and the psychological nature of the myths, and the
So,
ability for them to be foundational in cultures is very important.
well, so I mean, so the easy part with regard to the myths and why we struggle with the myths is because we've spent the better part of 400 years with white folks, and
Right.
so that's just it. That's all. There's nothing complex about that part, and because their myths, well, let's do it this way. Like their myths don't just happen to link with our myths. Their myths are predicated on our myths. So they establish what has become the institution of Christianity based on myths that were, taught and lived and learned in the Nile Valley 3, 4, 5,000 years before white folks evolved from what most folks consider the caves. And so when a concept is presented that is so it's kind of like let's think of this like comedy. Comedy is funny because something that the comic says relates to something in your frame of reference. That's why white religion is successful for us, because it relates to something in our ancestral consciousness that is inborn, that is literally innate in us. Because he is in charge of everything, we think his superiority is God given. That makes us vulnerable. That makes us tolerate white Jesus. That makes us tolerate white Moses. That makes us tolerate a Moses that tells the story about his own death after he died. It makes us vulnerable. And so, since we do that, we stay in this circle that almost ensures that we are going to be ahistorical, because we believe to a degree that history and knowledge is blasphemy. If it calls into question whatever we've been taught within the biblical frame, regardless of whether or not we can lay out the data points along the way to indicate or to prove that X amount of that stuff is purely myth, we we can't do that. We can't do that part because we think that is sacrilegious. And so that kind of keeps us spiraling. And so it is not that the teachings in and of themselves don't have benefit, is that the teachings in and of themselves are necessarily limited in the context of a social order that don't have justice. Most Black folks do not read the New Testament as a social justice,
Treatise.
treatise. That's
Treatise.
not what we do.
And that's all it is.
And that's all it is.
That's all it is.
And so if you can't read the Gospels and see the Gospels as 4 books about social justice for a second-class citizen in an oppressed, Palestine, then you can't understand Palestinians being oppressed by these settler colonial Israelis that live there now.
By the new Romans.
Correct.
Because literally
that's
what European settler Zionists were. They just
that's
new
who they
Romans.
are.
Another thing, since we in this stage, let's just make everybody upset who got to go to church tomorrow. Okay, and that is, if you take the 4 books, Matthew, Mark, and Luke has Jesus as a man dealing with social justice and dealing with their social order. It is John where he becomes something else. Okay? And it's John that the Christian power structure and social order is built on, because kings needed a divine intervention to justify their secular authority. And so what they claim is that their authority comes from a Jesus who's not like me and you. But in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus is a guy, okay? That he's never referred to as the Son of God or something like that. It's only in John. So all of these things have a social reality. You know what I mean? The none of these books showed up magically. They were all written by somebody, interpreted, translated by people. The meanings of them were changed. And one of our problems, just writ large, is up until the middle of the 19th century, people in the Western Hemisphere, I can't speak for Africa and Asia, I just don't know. But people in the Western canon took Genesis as historical truth, that this is the way the earth was formed. So the whole notion of anthropology, discovering ancient civilizations, dinosaur bones, none of this happened until the mid-1830s, 1850s. So anthropology as a science or practice is a couple hundred years old. But in that couple hundred years, we don't teach it. Nobody studies it, reads about, other than the professionals who learn. But it redefines the whole human experience. Okay, now you got to talk about human beings, Homo sapiens, and some Neanderthals and Homo erectus, whatever, as they are all around here a couple 100,000 years ago, possibly, and that our ancestral prototype is about 30,000 years old. And the whole notion of us living in large groups, civilization, that's what we call it, is something that in the last 5 to 10,000 years. But there's now a record of us being here for a couple 100,000 years. So what were we doing then? And so it removes you from the mythical notion of humans to a more empirical based understanding of how we evolved, why we evolved. I mean, it allows you to speculate on reality, as opposed to a preacher, theologian, high priest, or whatever telling you what I consider to be some bullshit that he don't know what he's talking about.
I told you 1,000 plus 1,000. That's what I told you.
Okay.
2,000. And you don't fall for that kind of foolishness because what we're talking about, and the reason we're bringing this up is because we're talking about freedom.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about taking agency. And we need, and we're talking about the political apparatus using this. King Leopold told his folks that were colonizing Africa to tell them that suffering is next to godliness and that having money is anti-God. That's what King Leopold exercised. And
Pastors say the same thing every Sunday.
that you are, brother. Listen, I'm not. Do I look like I'm arguing with you about that?
I didn't say you are. I was
No,
just making
no,
a note.
no. I know, but
You were just saying amen.
Hey,
Okay.
I was just saying amen.
yeah.
That wine is dude yelling at folks in his church right now.
I told you, man. 1,000 plus 1,000, Playboy. This is the deity line. You
Larry,
want
repeat that again.
huh?
Repeat that again, what you said, King Leopold said.
King Leopold said that suffering was close to godliness. That's what he took as he was colonizing Africa and
As he
killing
was
people,
chopping off hands
chopping hands off.
for lack of productivity.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have, Mike brought up in the green room, and I told you all Charlie Parker was going to come in here, hitting these notes, baby. He in here, he's getting the horn out the case. And I'm about to give him the stage in 1 second because I know my man. But yeah, I lost my train of thought. But Mike early on was talking about the origin stories and the myths, so forth. And obviously Dr. Alexander had some cogent things to add as well. And what we are dealing with, Gerald, because tangentially the subject we're still addressing is this third reconstruction. And we're chipping away at it, at things that we're going to have to rid ourselves of in order to deal with this and to see what's going on. Because you can go to church tomorrow and a pastor tell you, don't worry about anything. It's going to be all right. When in fact, Project 2025 does not fall short of telling you that we plan on enslaving these Negroes very, essentially is what they're trying to do. So just want to get your thoughts on this, the notion that this is a third reconstruction. Jeriel?
Oh, my fault. I didn't know you were asking me that question. I was listening intently.
Yes, sir. So, the notion that this is the third reconstruction what are you seeing?
I agree with you. I think definitely we're in a third reconstruction. When you see what's happening with the court, when you see the efforts that the president is making and the boldness with which they're moving, without a doubt, whether or not it's going to be successful is the issue for me, and how we respond to it.
Gerald, on that point, I don't think it's how we respond to it. And this is kind of where I am at this point. I think it's how white folks respond to it. Because here's the thing. Whatever they got planned for us, they can't do it to us unless they also do it to white folks. So the white agency freedom is going to have to be truncated in order to maintain a new kind of apartheid fascist social order. You just ain't gonna be able to do it just to us. It ain't gonna be like Mississippi, Alabama, and the South anymore.
Is that because you think because of the way we integrated around the country?
And the country's so much bigger. It's so much bigger now.
Mm-hmm.
For example, he's trying to figure out how do you move into urban areas because 70% of America lives in about 100 urban areas. Okay, so fundamentally, ain't nobody in the middle of Nebraska, ain't nobody in Mississippi. There is no rural America per se. There's some commercial farms and commercial ranches and stuff, but there is no small town rural America. So if you're going to put in a new, more oppressive social order, you got to oppress white folks too. I mean, all these white folks who are inside of these metropolitan areas who have their own sense of freedom, and let's just say some of them are culturally more liberal. I mean, just all of it. They have to figure out how to shrink all of that for everybody. So fundamentally, that this just ain't gonna be us. This is gonna be a new deal for everybody. And the real question will be for me, we're 14% of the population, Hispanics 18, 19% and growing. So Asian 7%. So that, I mean, let's just say the rest of them are white folks. So the real question is, what are the majority of white folks going to do? Or what is a critical mass of white people going to do? And I'll reference what I did in during the election last year. They got to go first. Okay, ain't no point in us showing up and talk. And we need to quit talking about our democracy, because it ain't never been our democracy. And their democracy has never worked in our interest. Okay, any benefit that we've ever received has been episodic and random.
And
Now, I don't disagree with that. I think you're exactly on point with that, and I think that's an excellent point. The question I have, what are your thoughts then on what are we supposed to be doing while all this is going on? Because I do believe that what you're saying is absolutely correct. I also believe vehemently that there are some issues that we need to drill down on while this is occurring. And I do agree, you know, we're running around talking about our democracy, our leadership is talking about that. I thought about it. I went to Congressman Clay's memorial last weekend, and they talked about him being the founding member of the Black Caucus, them being 8, then moving to 13, and now having 62 right now. And it really frustrated me as I thought about that. The 62 that we have up there are saying our democracy instead of drilling down on what's in the best interest for us, because most of them are only there because they represent Black districts.
Hold that point, Gerald, because I was there too. And I thought and it was interesting for me because it was kind of like revisiting a whole part of my life too. Just because I'm kind of in this moment when all of this is happening and hadn't thought about it in a real long time. But remember what they said the basis of the caucus was, so they could speak for Black America.
Right.
They didn't see themselves as 13 individual congressmen. They saw themselves as the collective, the voice for the collective of Black America. They wanted to meet with the president, not to tell him what their personal agenda was for their district, but to say, this is the agenda, we are here on behalf of 25 million Black people. Don't make no difference what state I came from, what district I came from. I'm a Black congressman representing everybody Black in America, whether they ever could vote for me or not. If they Black, I'm their congressman. That's what that 13 was about. This 62 ain't about shit.
Exactly.
Now that's
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, well, you didn't say it like that, so I just had to say it for you, okay?
Well, some things cannot be said with the impact that other people can say it with. Gerald and I can say that, but when you say it, it's said. And I mean, you know, so it's, and I mean, you know,
but how do we need to just start saying that, Mike?
We have. I mean,
I think about, I have a quote here behind me from Dr. King that says, you know, you begin to die the day you become silent about things that matter. And I just think we awfully silent about so much that matters right now.
We give people a pass because they're Black.
Right. Right.
And you didn't get a pass because you was black if you didn't live up to what the expectation of black people was for what you're supposed to be as a black leader. What you heard them say about Bill Clay, and literally, and it's I'll be honest, after 50 years, this stuff I forgot. Okay, I mean, I never forgot it, but time goes on and we all get older. But to understand who that brother was when he was that, to understand who Muhammad Ali was, not the old guy lighting the torch, but to understand who he was in 1967 when he said, "Ain't no Viet Cong ever called me a nigger, and I'm not going to fight your war." Bill Clay was also in the anti-war movement. Fundamentally, black political leadership used to be the tip of the spear for every moral that the women's movement, gay rights, all the anti-war movement, all of that was coming because black politics were the 300 Spartans at the pass of Thermopylae. And they say basically they were saying, I don't care how many soldiers Xerxes got, but he come in here and we'll meet him at Thermopylae, and that's where we go stop him. And then everybody else said, well, we'll come with you. We've lost our moral authority. The reason black politicians get ignored now, because they ain't speaking for black people. You could not ignore Bill Clay and Ron Dellums and Louis Stokes and Shirley Chisholm.
Can you speak for
they didn't say they were speaking for themselves.
Can you speak for black people when you take $20 million from AIPAC?
No.
No, you can't. But we will say,
and when he went to the podium, I got up and walked out.
We will say. We'll justify it. We'll be like, well, he getting that money though. And so because too many of us have internalized, the capitalist idea. And so that comes at a direct consequence to us. And so, I mean, when you look at it, it's not that, it's not that we don't ever get on board with, the needs of the least of these. We absolutely do when it is a highly, when it becomes a media story. But these people be suffering every day. And so we ain't in the streets questioning and protesting police brutality on a daily basis, only when it makes the news. And if it don't make the news, we don't think it's happening. Now, we will spend all day arguing about, Cardi B, Jay-Z, this dude that's about to do the Super Bowl.
That's it, Dr. Alexander, though. Don't you believe? I believe that's intentional.
But at some point we got.
When they put that out there, because
if you're doing film study, when that guy go in motion, then you know that if I send my guy in motion and that safety or that DB follows him, I know they playing man.
Right. That's why you send him in motion.
That's why I send him in motion. I send him in motion so I know what the play, so I know what the defense is. So yes, it's intentional. We know they blitzing.
Right.
We don't pick up the blitz. And so it can't keep being that.
Right.
And nor do we challenge when they put this out to defer us. We jump right on it. And everybody, as you indicated, they jump on the whole issue going on between Cardi and Nicki instead of focusing on the problem at hand right now.
We are prone to distractions.
Right.
Especially celebrity distractions. We are really prone to
celebrity distractions. We are vulnerable to that. And like now, I mean, so you got these cats in the NBA.
Exactly. That's what I'm just getting ready to say.
So the federal government says this involves the Costa Nostra, but it don't say none of their names. And so who's the mafia figure involved?
Right.
So we know if you say that and you say 5 families, we know who that is. But why don't you just say them for good measure? Because somebody don't know. But they ain't gonna do that, and we ain't gonna look it up. We gonna be like, see, they coming for the black man. Well, why is Chauncey involved in this and he makes $100 million or whatever? This is foolish. But this is what we do, and then we get on. So they coming for.
Well, wait a minute. I can tell you why Chauncey is involved, because he obviously owed that motherfucker something.
He owed him something, right?
Yeah.
So now he a mark.
And he owed them before this, and that's why his ass is sitting there.
And now he a mark because he owed him something.
Yeah, he said, "How you want to pay?" I
And
tell
Larry,
you what.
you and I both know some people have done some proffers, haven't they?
Yeah, right.
There've been proffers made and accepted already.
Yeah, that's been
Down there, in the words of Bill Cosby, singing like the Temptations.
Yeah, there's been some multiple proffers done.
This stuff is going on all the time, and the fight, that fight, them boots on the ground where we actually have the ability to have impact. It ain't even that we're too distracted. We use the distraction as a justification for we ain't not wanting to do it anyway.
And to be honest, if you're thinking about the macro or the larger interests of black people, Chauncey and Damon Jones, they just got to be casualties, man. I ain't got no time for that.
I ain't got no time for that.
I don't care what you do. Okay, I mean whatever. Okay.
Do not have the bandwidth for them right now.
Right.
Because one thing about a reconstruction is that afterwards there will be a reformation of something, and we need to. So if in fact, instead of us looking at this as something that is going to be totally detriment, we need to be thinking about what we want to have in this renegotiation.
Right.
And we need to be out front with that. But at the time, we do not have the muscle to even go to the table to talk about what we need.
And with whom are we renegotiating?
We're renegotiating with the oligarchs.
They're not negotiating with us. That's the whole point. They just take what they want, and that's it.
Here's what my philosophy is on this.
And so in a situation like that, you've got to be just as forceful over what it is you want. And you've got to use every quiver that you have to get that. And so, but you cannot, and this isn't anything new.
No, it's not.
This isn't anything new. So we have got, like Mike famously said, a bully doesn't want to fight all day. He just wants your lunch money. So we got to fight. But the problem Larry, that we have is that we don't have anybody. Number one, the referee is not going to side with you, the courts. So what do you do in a situation like this? Because for every effective offensive move, I am convinced nature has an equally effective defensive move. And so what do we need? The question is, and what do we need to do? And how do we do it?
I'm going to pose an answer to that. I'd like all three of you guys to respond to. Here's how I'm looking at this. I think, obviously, Trump is a poor white man's idea of what a rich, powerful white man is. I mean, it's like if second string white boys ever got to be in charge, this is what it looks like. Donald Trump.
A comedian, a white comedian, I can't think of his name, said that Trump is like a hobo whose number came in.
That's right. Yeah,
that's why you see his name on everything. That's just like a hobo whose ship came in.
Yeah, that's it. And Trump don't have no ego. All he got.
That's said by a guy who ain't
right. All he is idiot. Okay, he's primordial slime. Okay, so, but he's flying the airplane. So here's what I know: the airplane is gonna crash, and all of us are on it. So I'm gonna just make sure my seat belt is fastened, and I'm gonna wait for him to crash the plane, and I'm gonna see who survives the plane crash. Cause fuck trying to get him not to crash the plane. He gonna crash the plane. Him crashing the plane is white folks' problem. My thought is our real chance to change the shit happens after he totally fucks it all up. And fundamentally, that may be in our interest. Now it could be worse, but it don't have to be. If we play a longer game and say, because let me ask you a question: if he blows America up, what would we be sad about? That's like the plantation being on fire and the big house burning and the cotton burn or the tobacco burn. Why would I give a fuck?
That's like Negroes being mad about the White House.
Right. Yeah. Why I give a fuck about that?
Right.
So what I'm saying is, so wait a minute, and white folks, if that shit is that important to you, you do something about that, man. Now, if you want my help, I'm gonna tell you what that costs, though, because you ain't got enough ass to do it by yourself. Now I get to send you the bill because now you need something, and I ain't for free. So we don't have that kind of relationship. We ain't brothers. We ain't family. I'll never be with him, but I don't have to care about you.
But to see, that's a mindset that these folks don't have. They're still running around talking about my democracy, our democracy.
Who
And,
are the folks you talking about, Larry?
Talking about the Black Caucus and all these other folks that are in positions to do any sort of
These people are aligned with the white supremacists in Israel. That's it. So
You're talking about the Trump people, right?
no, I'm talking about the black people in the black congressional
Black
caucus.
The Black Caucus.
Wait a minute. Here's something else, and that I'll give you a perspective because I got 15, almost 20 years on you guys. That if you are from Bill Clay's generation, and to a certain extent, Mike Jones's, because I'm the back end of his stuff, you didn't come into politics to manage American politics or accommodate it. All of these people were change agents. Matter of fact, you didn't want to improve America. You wanted to change America in one manner or another. Fundamentally, everybody had, if you were a product of that time, you had rejected America. Okay? That there was nothing in America worth saving. That was your intellectual, philosophical predisposition. So they're change agents. Now, the difference in being a politician versus an activist gets to be a purist, and they can stay morally correct all the time, and they lose a lot. When you're a politician, Bill Clay is famous for, obviously, the motto of the Black Caucus about no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. But he said something else that matters. He said in politics, you take what you can, you give up what you must. So it's fundamentally, but you're always looking to play a hand, to play the card when it benefits you. Because you ain't there for them, you're there for you. And you're there for the people that sent you. That's the disconnect that we have now. And that's why I came up with the term when I first started writing, the entrepreneurial politician.
That's correct.
Bill Clay was not an entrepreneurial politician. None of these leaders were entrepreneurs. They were called, like Isaiah, like all Old Testament prophets. And we just take the book as the metaphor now. They were called to do this. They were sent, and sometimes not even called. They were sent. Okay? They ain't planned to do none of it. But that's where they found themselves, and that's what they did. I would say we don't have the leadership now, so we kind of need this leadership purged. I mean, you
Yes.
know, the one of the things that um, everybody here is frat, and there's now you can get in the frat. You can kind of just write a check, especially at the graduate level, and if somebody misses a meeting, you in the frat. But there was a time you had to go through some shit to get in the frat. Okay, and one of the reasons there was a connection to everybody because everybody had to go through the same shit. And now anybody can show up and be a black leader. We talking about celebrities. We ain't talking about leaders. We ain't talking about anybody. Bill Clay, if you my age, Bill Clay is Avon Barksdale. Didn't nobody give Avon shit. When you saw former mayors and the majority leader of the Congress talk about Bill Clay, he talking about Bumpy Johnson, man. He talking about Frank Lucas. They look at Luciani or Meyer Lansky talking about Bumpy Johnson. Okay, they talk about, well, what did Bill say? What did the congressman say? Because
I
if we
clearly
go,
understand it. I think that we are, in my age bracket, are really on the back end of that. Because I remember when I was a little boy, I was only like 5 or 6 years old, but I can remember when he was running. I can only remember when he was running because we lived in the city and my dad had painted on the car, elect Bill Clay. It wasn't a sign you put on the car. He painted it on the car and he took the car. And I remember my mother and we had to walk to the grocery store because he had the car out campaigning for Bill Clay. So I've always, remembered that and remembered Clay, growing up. And, when I was and I'm sure with Charles and Larry too, we were teenagers and stuff when Clay was in Congress. I can remember when, he was in Congress and the things he was doing. And I could also see the difference clearly once I was an adult when people began to take over after him and when they became entrepreneurial politicians, as you indicated. And I think the current Wesley is the protocol for the entrepreneur politician. Having him in that seat now, you watch that video and think about him and then have him get up to speak, you can't even see a correlation between the two as to why is he even here.
I'm going to say writ large, that's a cultural issue of who we are now. But your father was for Bill Clay in that moment in 1968, because 10 years before that, when it wasn't no black congressional seat, Bill Clay spent 100 days in jail,
right,
protesting. Now, wasn't no benefit to him for none of that. Okay, he was there because he called to be there, felt he had to be there, whatever. And he said, "No, we ain't backing up." He's like, and he wasn't the only one. And I can name you 3, 4 more people that I became know personally, but all of them was there in that moment when somebody had to be there, and they showed up. They answered. They were Isaiah when their moment came. Who shall we send? Who will go for us? And he raised his hand and said, "Send me." Okay, it ain't no more complicated than that. Somebody will preach that tomorrow and can't connect Isaiah to Bill Clay and Jefferson back, but it's the same shit. Because everybody has that moment. The question is, are you going to be Isaiah? Okay, or you go hear the question and then raise your hand. Because in this metaphor, God could send anybody he wants because he's God. Okay? But he says, who shall I send? Then the next line is, but who will go for us? Okay?
And that's exactly the point we at right now. Who is going to go for us?
Who's going to
And
go
who's
for
going to
us?
stand up? Who is going to be the one right now in this crisis that we're in?
To say,
who is going to be the one to stand up?
And be Isaiah to say, here am I, send me.
Send me. And we've yet to see that in our leadership, both locally and nationally. We are still waiting to see who is going to be that one.
Well, and that is going to be very difficult to find, and everybody gets a trophy generation. So,
and that's what I'm thinking. I think you got to wash all of this out. You know what? If we were an NBA team, what you say, you ain't gonna win with none of these guys.
No.
What we gonna do? We go let them go, trade them, do whatever you want to do, get some draft picks, and we got to start all over again.
Yeah, and let's transition to our next topic. It's fascinating conversation, gentlemen, on the previous topic. But our next topic, let's talk, speaking of distractions, and Dr. Alexander alluded to this earlier in his comments, and this notion that we have some kinship to the actual deconstruction of the White House and the anger that has been brewing in parts of our communities, smoldering in parts of our community because
you mean in the Black community?
Yes, there are.
Really?
There are pockets.
I didn't know that.
Yes, so I'll allow Dr. Alexander to further instruct us, but believe it or not, we have some attachment to Master's house. Dr.
Not only do we have that attachment, again, this is one of those clear, this is just clear evidence of, that, we walk around in this ahistorical place. So yes, the White House and much of the Capitol was constructed by enslaved African labor.
Mm-hmm.
The East Wing was not constructed until like 1902.
Right.
They don't have nothing to do with us. So it really don't matter. And so this thing that somehow or another he's tearing down something that we built, when the fact that we built it, I mean, again, I'm not sure even of the, I'm not sure of the value of that, other than, the constant conversation. We built this thing. Well, we ain't built this thing by choice. So I don't know if that's anything that you want to leverage.
I didn't use that or think of it as leverage.
No, I'm not saying you, Gerald. I'm saying
I know that. I just want to comment on something.
Yeah, this is what the people, this is kind of what the people are saying. It's like, and I'm like, enslaved Africans didn't build the East Wing. So, and we didn't build any of the stuff that we built that became the United States by choice.
Mm-hmm.
So what difference does it make? If he tear it up, it's just another manifestation of him tearing up this thing that in some ways we need to happen. We just need to figure out how we ultimately benefit.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with that. I posted something and I went back and forth with it. Not back and forth, because I just responded one time. I don't go back and forth, but I posted something about enslaved Africans built the White House. And I wasn't doing it as a flex to say that we had some ownership to the White House. I was doing that to keep people focused on the sense that I wouldn't care if they tore the whole thing down, because it was enslaved people that built it that were never compensated.
That were not compensated.
That were forced to build it.
So
I wouldn't give a damn if they blew the White House up, because We never got paid for all of that. It doesn't mean anything to me. That was my point, and
Mhm.
that was what I wanted to reiterate to individuals, that this means nothing to me, nothing at all. You could tear the whole thing down. This is not a story to me because you made my people build this for free. So I'm all for blowing it up.
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, it just shows that that guy don't give a dang about his history. So, and the folks with him don't give a dang about his history and what's supposed to be their symbols of
It
authority.
shows you
So he
how
can't care
narcissist
about
he
us.
is.
So why do we keep being surprised when white folks keep whiting? If they don't care about what they hold sacred, and if we ain't learned nothing else, this it, his first and his second presidency to this point, you know, the first year of his second presidency, have shown you they don't care about what is theirs. So why are we surprised when they demolish and destroy what is ours? We
Mm.
we not watching that guy run across the formation. We keep we, we keep waiting on them guys. We keep waiting on them guys to run zone, and they showing us they running a they playing man. We keep misreading the formation.
And at some point, that's your fault, not your opponent's fault.
At some point, that's your fault.
And I think that's the side effect, though, of integration and how white we've become.
You know,
I mean, integration didn't tell us to go just not talk to black folks and talk to white folks all the time and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
But I think,
the other parts
integrating,
about that
leaving our
stuff,
communities and integrating with
we
them.
left our communities because all of this stuff that we be saying about how good our communities was obviously was not absolutely true. It was true here, it was true there, but it probably wasn't true over there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have no
Wait a
reason to
minute.
leave good things.
And here's what I will tell you: if you're my age, your age,
Mm-hmm.
all of us grew up in a house that was too small, and all of us grew up in a house that if somebody gave it to you today, you wouldn't live in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the truth.
and let's talk, and you know, we've got to make sure that
Even though the house was too small,
we
Mike,
have to
what was the sensitive?
identify,
Go
we
ahead.
have to identify the structural elements that had us in those neighborhoods.
Right.
They wouldn't insure our loans. Our parents had to come up with bigger
Correct.
payments. Our parents had to pay cash, redlining. When the banks crashed in the 1920s, they didn't insure black accounts, you know, the church accounts that they had. When the black banks crashed, they didn't insure those deposits. So we're not going to let them off scot-free for that because that was designed by the power structure as well.
But so Larry, your point is that where we built this cohesive, wonderful thing that I was glad I grew up in, it wasn't like we was black pioneers. Our parents and foreparents was black pioneers, and they staked out this ground and said, "This is where we go build our dream." Now, this is where we got shoved. This is where we got herded to. Now,
And
we made it work after we got there, but we didn't necessarily choose none of it.
Mike, do you remember Franklin Avenue in St. Louis?
Hell yeah, I'm that old,
Franklin Avenue.
huh?
What happened to Franklin Avenue?
It turned into Dr. King.
And they ran those families that were able
Right,
to create a community out. They
right.
ran them out and disseminated them. So even when so that's why it's important for us to study the military sciences and in order for us, even if it doesn't come to fighting, to strategically protect what we build and make, you know, and make lemonade out of lemons. Because even, you know, when you had a viable community like that, that was not the best. It fit your description of everything that you just stated. But when you build it into a loving community, they came and eradicated it. So
Right.
so what do you do in a system like that? And that is why the question is what it is. What do we do in this
I,
third
I, Larry, I think the answer to that is George Clinton's comment: "Free your mind, and your ass will follow." So don't you have to have the presence of mind to always understand that if you're black in America, individually and collectively, we're always at risk. There's never been a time that, and you have to tell your kids, I don't believe that there'll ever be a time where you'll be black in America and not at risk. So the most important thing for you to remember is the last thing a referee tells the two fighters in the middle of the ring. He says, "I want a clean fight, break when I tell you to break." But the last thing he says is the one thing that they got to pay attention to. He said, "Well, protect yourself at all times." Because he ain't there to protect you.
Absolutely not.
He there to referee the fight. So what we continue to lose sight of is our responsibility to protect ourselves, because these people are not trustworthy. You cannot
Can't trust them.
You cannot trust them with your welfare,
And
your
you should-
individual welfare or your collective welfare. And to the extent you have relationships and you know white people that are not like that, do not take that as your that ought to be your frame of reference to the white community. I think
Group dynamics and individual dynamics are
two totally different things. That's an individual
I think
dynamic.
everybody does not understand that right now. And I think that's the difference in where we are community-wise. What you talked about earlier, Mike, in the community you lived in, the houses were too small. They didn't suit everybody, and they were forced to be in that community. But everybody in that community understood that.
Right.
And they told you those lessons, and
Right.
they protected you.
Right.
And now we're not in communities like that. We don't live around people that understood that are trying to protect us, that are telling us that. That's the difference that I see in community here now. I understand that we were forced to be in there, and it was not the best conditions, but we were getting better knowledge and better understanding of who we are and how we needed to operate.
And Gerald,
So did life
we were
get
looking
bad?
out for each other. We were looking out for each other, like how now we're talking about people may not get their food stamps next month. Well, back then people were already cooking and growing gardens and supplying food to other people. They weren't dependent on food stamps. They were doing that in the community themselves. And as we are spread out and integrated now, and in these many of us are in communities where we're the only black people on the street, or one or two, and we don't even have contact with those people on the block with us.
So
But
did life
Gerald,
absolutely get bad for all black folks who moved somewhere else?
no.
No. And some black now. So I mean, if the conversation is to be more nuanced, we do have to give some thought to those who intentionally moved to, because they could, to exclusive areas and were isolated. They were isolated in those areas, and they were obviously isolated from us. That's their life. But we got to understand that they are more the minority than the masses. Yeah. And so, if there's any value in the conversation, the thing has to be then, so why weren't people moving to those places that did have more stability? And so these things occurred, and there were options. People took whatever options that they took. And, so that's a part of the piece. But so again, if we're going to talk about, like, you ain't got to, so right now we know that SNAP benefits is going to drop, they're going to be gone as we're looking at, November 1st. So if you don't live in the hood, you ain't got no responsibility for the folks.
No, I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying you in particular. That's a general question. And so it can't
Oh, you
keep
still
being
have
because
responsibility,
we
yes.
still have a responsibility wherever we are. And that becomes the thing. And
But I don't
so,
know if everybody understands that once they move out of the way.
and
Wait,
again, if they don't, that's a
that's
general problem that we
part of
got to deal
our
with. Yes.
right. That's our problem. That's the point. I want to connect Charles and Gerald.
Let me say
Yeah,
this real quick, Mike,
sure.
real quick. But everything that you said, the three of you all said, is founded in individuals that have orientation and they have consciousness about who they are. That's what you, and in those communities, there was consciousness. And in those communities, there was an orientation about who we are. Right now, to a large degree, we're disoriented.
So Larry, let me put the three of you all together because literally you've answered what our dilemma is. Our physical circumstances may change, will change. That's what evolution is. Nothing stays the same. Evolution don't mean it got better, it just means it's different. And part of Darwin's theory of evolution is that species that are able to adapt to changing environments and conditions can survive. Species that can't adapt won't, because the fundamental things you have to do to be okay are still required, but the conditions under which you may have done them at one point are now different conditions. So the question is, do you consciously, subconsciously have an understanding, and these have to be generational understandings of how we now have to do that. So at some point, if, to Larry's point, consciousness about what it means to be Black in America, which should have led us or would have led us to say, okay, now that we're not physically confined to this space, but we still live in this hostile environment, as we reach out and we go in different places because we got options now, and most of these places are now physically better for us. How do we stay connected as a people, as a tribe, and so that we are integrated? I'm not Jewish. I know Jewish people, and I'm going to say something for which I have no basis for, but just long range. So this is not, and I could be wrong as hell. But Jewish people seem to have faced the same dilemma, or faced with the same dilemma. At one point, they were all stuck in ghettos. They had to live together. But as their physical circumstances changed, as people, they could move around and they could become integrated into a larger America, because the core of their identity, though, was what their religion was. They were able to stay connected. So there's a Jewish community no matter where they live. Okay, it appears to me. Okay, now again, I'm not in that community. I've never talked to anybody about this. I'm drawing a conclusion from a superficial observation. So the real question becomes, how do we do that in America? You know, because before, the key to our cohesion and solidarity was our physical proximity. And once that started to change, we never figured out how to evolve to maintain that cohesion and solidarity when we don't share the same spaces. Because I think there is, and that goes back to Larry's point about consciousness, because your consciousness should supersede your physical environment, or at least be equal to it.
I mean, the answer to that is what Gerald said. I mean, We gotta be careful with them folks. They became white. That's why it works for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that that just is what it was. They became whites, and right now they ain't cohesive. You just don't hear from the people who aren't Zionists. The Zionists who control media have successfully, for years, stamped out the Jewish people who are not self-avowed white supremacists. And
And
so,
that's why I qualified my statement
yeah,
for my example. Okay.
I think we have, excuse me, Mike, I think we have to be in close proximity to each other.
Okay.
In order to keep us level set, we need to be around and in communication with each other on a regular basis, because we'll never be able to pass for white. And we joked about this, Larry, the other day in conversation. We have light-skinned people that tend to believe that they can pass, and it becomes problematic for them because they oftentimes will do things thinking they can pass because they're light-skinned, but they can't. And you don't know a Jew when you see them in the community.
Right.
They white people unless they identify themselves. If they don't identify themselves as Jewish, you just see them as the other white people in the neighborhood. I'm in U City. It's one of the highest Jewish populations around. So they get to pass as white. So they don't even have to deal with the issue that we deal with.
But isn't that the goal of the petty bourgeoisie in our community to clearly integrate into a
To be
society,
unburdened from their blackness.
to be
Right. Yeah, that
unburdened?
is, but that's
And
part of
so,
that,
and,
going to
and,
Dr. Alexander. I just think
how do
that's part of
how
that
do we deal
syndrome.
with that? Because we have so many black faces that are doing the work of white folks that are just as diabolical. I mean, Colin
What
Powell, the first bombing that he oversaw was of African people, and so I mean it is or black people. So I mean, what do we do about that? I think it gets back to the level of consciousness, but there are just so many of us that think that the evolution of us is to evolve into something that sits hand in hand or sits next to whiteness.
Larry, I like to raise a point, and this is kind of like his personal and historical. But one thing that separated the '60s for anybody who kind of came to political maturity or was politically mature in the '60s, you had about 10, 12 years in which, and let's call it, which makes it kind of a generation across two generations, where the dominant black sentiment was, we're not Americans. Now we're here. And if you read, I think James Baldwin is in two acts. There's early James Baldwin when he got famous as a writer, and then there's James Baldwin, the commentator in the late '60s or '70s. He's writing totally different. But more than anybody else, and I didn't read him back then because he wasn't radical enough for me. Okay, that's how far out to the left of Mao Zedong. Okay, but Baldwin is talking about America is hopeless, but that sentiment was really the dominant sentiment of it. We've done a program with Ryan Karinka. So Kwanzaa comes from the deep-seated understanding that Christianity, Christmas, America, all this, that ain't our stuff.
Right.
And we need something. The Black Panther Party was meant to be Here's our political answer to white political institutions, that the Democratic Party ain't the answer, okay? So that fundamentally it was a 10, 15-year effort to figure out how to literally disengage from America and recreate. Because the one thing that would be consistent, whether you were kind of a political revolutionary or a cultural nationalist, I mean, because there was a whole lot of internal arguments and issues going on in that. So I don't want you to think that it was this kumbaya moment, because it really wasn't. But one thing that we all agreed about was America and white America ain't shit. Okay, there was nobody defending and speaking up for the American project. That's why in 1968, before he's murdered, Dr. King has had as many problems or many issues with the black left as he did with the white right. Okay, he's sitting on an island all by himself. White folks don't want him, and black folks are saying fuck them. Okay, and he's a Christian theologian trying to figure out how you bring this shit together. But 3 months before he died, he talking to Harry Belafonte, or before he was murdered. He talking to Harry Belafonte. He said maybe all this shit was a mistake. Basically, maybe these brothers are white. Okay, and he didn't say that, but he raised the question. So you talking about a whole black community in a different place. You're talking about people like the founders of the Black Caucus being a whole different kind of political animal than Jeffries. Now, I mean, you can't conflate these two times. They totally different, and
It's just, it was the circumstances, but we're getting some of that, not all of it, but with some of that is being recreated right now in the time that we're in. And so when we have a Jeffries and a Crockett and these other individuals, we do know based on the past what they should be doing in the present, and they're not doing it. And they're not standing up. Right. They are not standing up for black people. And the fact that it's 62 of them, and we know what the margins are in the House. So they have a significant amount of power now. It was, they were 13 and exercised a significant amount of power. This is 62. 62 in a divided government where 4 or 5 votes will make a difference. They have a tremendous amount of leverage if they had any courage.
Wait a minute, they're a Black Caucus.
But every time you hear one of them talk, they talk about being in the minority and not having any power.
Wait a minute.
And they talk about the American people. And the thing about it is that if you go down the list and look at that 62, more than half of them come from a district that is primarily black. They in a safe seat. They're not even in a controversial seat.
I think it's more than that. I just read a study that says majority white districts, even Democrat or Republican, typically, by and large, do not elect black representatives.
No,
they do not.
The only reason they're in there is because of black people.
Because of black people. So, but that brings us to our final topic of today. Some of them won't be there. The final topic is the push for gerrymandering that's being rubber stamped. And many of you all have been keeping up with the Supreme Court's docket. And last week, there were oral arguments posed that were attacking Section 2 of the Voter Rights Act. If you have not had an opportunity to listen to those oral arguments, I strongly would encourage you to do so. The sister from the Legal Defense Fund put on a masterful education for the Supreme Court. And you also, in real time, were able to see the fallacies I shouldn't, the infirmities of the Supreme Court by some of the questions asked by Kavanaugh and by the handmaiden, as they call her, Comey Barrett, because they just were clueless as to what's going on. But I want to open up the discussion to gerrymandering and how this is going to affect that 62 that we just spoke of, and the composition of the House of Representatives. We should start with Mike Jones.
Well, I think I was one of the things I was going to say, but there was a pushback to the 60s. By 1968, Richard Nixon is the president. A conservative Jimmy Carter follows him after he gets busted for Watergate. In 1980, Reagan becomes president, and there's this conservative white reaction, but it's to this radical part of the 60s. I would, to your point, as Gerald was talking about the 62 in the House, I'm prepared to consider, okay, not advocate because I ain't sure, but I would want to have a discussion internally among us at halftime, so to speak. Would we be better off? And in this gerrymander, you could lose 20 black seats. But would we be better off with 40 hardcore soldiers than 62 soft as hospital cotton congressmen?
Mm-hmm.
Because we talked about it earlier, that the founding members of the Black Caucus saw themselves representing Black America. They happened to be the elected representatives of Black America that came from different places, but they were the national voice for all of us, and they organized themselves like a national body. That's where that Congressional Black Caucus weekend came from.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. I just want to ask a question. At that time, all of them were coming out of solidly black districts.
Solidly black districts.
That's what I thought.
There was
no way of mixing it.
Yeah, they were Black congressmen. You know, that was black wasn't no adjective. Black congressman was a compound noun. Okay, that's all one thing. Okay?
I can answer that question right now. If you ask me, I'd rather have the 40 hardcore than the 62. You know, we can get rid of 22 of them soft ones, and we're gonna have a hard team. I'd rather go with that.
And I'm raising the question because I think we owe ourselves that conversation.
I think so too. I think that's a real discussion.
If you decide that you can basically say, I don't give a fuck what they do, because the 40 I want to keep go still be here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the 20 you got rid of. Shit, okay.
What were they doing for us anyway?
What was they doing for us anyway?
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't lose.
I'm back to Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately?
That's the story in life, man. That's just all of this shit is transactional.
Mm-hmm. It's transactional, exactly.
So that's addition by subtraction.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, what do you think?
I agree. That is nothing really to add to that, because I think that's what we're looking at. But I will add, I think the whole thing again, it kind of speaks to our fascination with, media presentation, because those folks are on TV at all. Many of us think that they are legitimate. They provide legitimate leadership and are legitimate in their own right otherwise. When in reality, they don't do nothing for us. They don't do nothing for us collectively, and they don't do nothing for their districts.
And I know that, and I'm asking this question because I'm just not as knowledgeable about how engaged he's been. I know Cleaver is one of those that's under threat in Missouri, in Kansas City, but I just don't know how effective he's been since he's been in Congress because I don't hear a lot from him.
Well, he doesn't come from a majority black district. Never has. That congressional seat in Kansas City that has had a black congressman for a long time.
Right.
Okay, Alan Wheat, Cleaver.
And I don't really remember him making major stances either.
Because they're a black congressman from an integrated district.
Okay.
Okay. So they ain't gonna be Bill Clay. Now they come out of Freedom Incorporated, which is a whole different political animal in Kansas City. That wish we were that here in St. Louis. We never got to that level. But the congressman, now it's a liberal district. It has a lot of organized labor. So you got a liberal congressman that could vote for damn near anything the Black Caucus was for, but could be the tip of the spear. Somebody
Could be
like
an advocate.
Yeah.
He
Somebody
could not
like
be an advocate for black people.
Yeah, but a white congressman from that district would damn near have to vote for the same whatever the Black Caucus was for. Okay, so there's enough internal leverage in that district with legitimate black political power that you're gonna always have to speak to the interests of black people if you want to stay in that seat. And it kind of flips when in a district like that, the congressperson is black because their public face has to also accommodate the reality of the district.
And that's the same situation we're in right now with the first congressional district.
No, you still got a historically black district here.
Oh, we got a district. No, I'm talking about the person that's leading it.
Oh, okay, right. Well, but we don't produce Bill Clays anymore. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you had two generations that probably came out of the civil rights, black power movement into politics and government. Anybody younger than you guys ain't got a clue about none of that. They were not incubated in that space. They were incubated in a whole different political culture, different political time.
Also, Mike, I think it also happened prior to us too. I think one of the mistakes that was made in that time period here is that we didn't build and grow enough black leadership under Clay's administration. And I think it appears sometimes that people were held back in order, and I know he wanted his son to be the congressman, but I don't know if that was the best idea. And I know it's human nature to want to promote your children, but I think there should have been more of an effort in developing leadership.
Well, I think two things, and I'm a product of that time. So nobody developed leadership. If you wanted to be a politician and you was young, you had to be Marlowe, because everybody that was older than you was Avon, and they wasn't giving up nothing. Okay, so it was, you can have what you can take, you can keep what you can hold. Okay,
Those of you all that are new to the show, Marlowe is a reference to a self-determined drug dealer in Baltimore that came up by pulling himself by his own bootstraps. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. The American dream, right? And to do that, he had to go after an old, successful hardened drug. So yeah, so I want you to understand that's how black politics was now. Okay, it ain't but so many corners, and if you want one, you're gonna have to take one from somebody who.
But you have to admit, a space was reserved for Lacy.
Yeah, because his daddy was Avon. Okay, what the fuck you want me to say? Okay. Right.
I
But
always thought he was being sexist too, because I think Michelle would have been the better pick.
what I would speak to is also the impact of Ronald Reagan. Whether you Bill Clay, anybody from that era was functioning inside of the political culture of the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson, the Great Society, where government, the public sphere, was someplace that attracted talented people who wanted to make an impact and a difference. So if you were young Mike Jones, I wasn't no missionary. I wanted to be an impact player at wherever I was going to do. And when I looked around, politics appealed to me more than business. And it's too late for me to go to law school or something like that. So I picked politics. I mean, I don't want you to think it was high-minded stuff. It was just, I don't want to punch a clock. I don't want to be average. This is my best shot at being who. It's why guys play ball, and the ones that get to the league are successful, not just because they're talented. It's because they see that as their opportunity to become something they're trying to become. Talented guys who don't have that same reason or motivation, they don't make it because they're not willing to put in the work. So that's over there. Reagan shifted the whole culture of America politically. So if government is the problem, you don't want to be. So now you got multiple generations of black folks. I never heard growing up young. I ain't never heard nobody black say I want to be an entrepreneur. And matter of fact, you didn't want a job in a corporation because it was too many white folks there that you'd have to accommodate. That part of the reason you wanted to be in politics is because you could call your own shot. Okay, you didn't have to accommodate that dominant white culture. And so you were looking for places where you could assert your manhood, but your black manhood. Okay, and politics accommodated that. Reagan did a very successful job, and you got to understand, Reagan is ultimately the battle that right wingers won, that they've been fighting Roosevelt since the 30s, to redefine the so that politics and government is no longer a dominant player. And we bought into it too. And then the politics and the black politicians that come after us are all cut out of the Bill Clinton accommodationists for. So they're not trying to change America. They're just trying to manage America. They don't want America to be different. They just don't want the oppression to be so obvious. So they're socially liberal, but they're fairly right wing economically and in terms of power. So that generation before, those multiple generations before, was much more focused on how do you change the power relationships. Post Reagan is how do you maintain the oligarchy and the social hierarchies that are based in economics. So what we forget also is that we are products of this larger American culture too. Okay, it impacts us. Now we may have a black expression of it, or stylistically, our stuff may look and feel a little different, but the forces that are shaping white America are also the forces that are shaping black America. So as I've gotten older and look back, I don't think you go produce a Bill Clay. I don't even think you go produce a Mike Jones. For the same reason you ain't gonna produce a Duke Ellington. and a Miles Davis or Duke Ellington and Charlie Parker, because music is not played like that anymore. Musicians are not created in that kind of space anymore. You know, it happens someplace else. So the Duke Ellington Orchestra, the Count Basie Orchestra, their functions, they came out of a time in the late 20s, the 30s to 40s, that made it possible for them to get to a certain level. And Duke Ellington and Count Basie were extraordinary enough to maintain them over their lifetime. But didn't nobody come behind Count Basie or Duke Ellington, not because people didn't want bands anymore. It's just because the environment that's necessary for them no longer existed. So we started this conversation in the green room, and we haven't really gone into it, but we keep alluding to it indirectly. We have not accommodated or accounted for, that's what I'm looking for. We have not accounted for the evolution of the social political ecosystem and how that impacts behaviors and attitudes for subgroups of people and individuals. Because we're all products of our environment, and ultimately we're a product of how we respond to the environment. But that changes things, and so that's why, you know, I'll say about the United States that America is changing, but America hasn't changed. So there's two things happening. There are always changes at a superficial level, but then the underlying foundational elements of the country really have never changed, particularly when it relates to class and race and economics. And anybody that shows you anything different, like Barack Obama, is an illusion. He ain't a reality.
Dr. Alexander, your thoughts?
I wholeheartedly agree with that last statement. Um, you know, just to start there in terms of how we end up dealing, struggling to deal with the complexities of everyday life, so even when he gets into the seat, you hear people talking and saying, well, now Black children know they can be anything, which means that we have a significant number of people off the rip who only value this for its symbolic, for its symbolic impact, not because there was necessarily going to be this huge shift. And
Doc, let me just insert, and then we've said it here before, that when we talk about politics, we're talking about the division of resources.
Correct.
Go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so it did not impact that in a significant way. And, and so, and nor were people, looking for that. I mean, when I hear critiques about Barack Obama, I might hear somebody say he didn't pardon the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Nope, he didn't. And so now what? It's like, it's these symbolic things, right? And so we still kind of struggle, not even kind of, we still struggle with the the meaning and impact of politics, the meaning and impact of economics, the meaning and impact of social science altogether, right? And so it's like all of these things mean something, and they all give an idea about how we are relating to this environment around us, and to the degree that at any given time, this thing might get difficult. It might become uncomfortable. Interacting with certain folks might become a little edgy. Your relative resources at a particular time might be at risk. We all for the avoidance. We all for the distraction. We will get off task. We will get off. We will get off message, because that withdrawal, that retreat, we've grown to understand as a safe space, when in reality it continues to be to our detriment.
Well, that is Dr. Christmas. I want to hear your thoughts as we conclude the show, and we'll finalize it with a summation on how to deal with this FBI probe by the Mike Jones, as he did in the green room earlier. The FBI probe dealing with these NBA players, I think. But beforehand, Dr. Christmas, what are your thoughts?
I agree with everybody said. I think we definitely have a problem with symbolism and what real politics is, without a doubt. And I was in Congress, when Obama was elected, working for Senator McCaskill, and I know.
I love the way how you gleaned over that. Gerald was in the office of Claire McCaskill, the senator from Missouri, doing that. But go ahead. That's not even the foundation he deserves, but that is, and he was not running errands. But
It's just a stated fact.
yeah, he so.
But it was when I think back on it now, it was a tremendous amount of, symbolism more than it was actually getting policy done for Black people. And I think that
That you mean Obama's term.
I'm talking about Obama's term, and especially the first term, because that was the term where he was in the same position that Trump is in now.
Or Biden was in his first 2 years.
Exactly. With having full control of the Congress, both the Senate and the House, and really having the country in a progressive thought. And there was no movement towards moving Black people. It was pretty much managing the ship. And that's what Obama did in those two administrations.
And too often trying to get the minority to agree with him.
Exactly. He was, definitely one that would come in as, to try to bring a consensus and get Black people to agree to these things that wouldn't be in their best interest and would not. He walked a fine line. He walked a very fine line, and because of his, I think, background, having a white mother and not having a Black father in his life, he was able to walk that line that way.
That was well stated and stated.
Although I do think that he would have never been elected if he had a white wife. I think if he had not been married to a Black woman, he would not have gotten elected.
I agree.
Absolutely. Mike Jones, we've talked about distractions earlier, and I love the actual statement that you made with respect to these NBA players that found themselves in precarious situations and on the wrong side of the V and US, USA, the United States versus your name typically is not a good thing.
Right.
Typically,
for me, and I've kind of always been like this on stuff like this. I'm kind of the position that what fathers have to tell their sons at a certain point, when they get to a certain age, let me know how that work out for you. Okay, ain't nothing your daddy gonna do about that, man. And if you had asked me ahead of time, I'd have told you shouldn't do that. But since you didn't, and you grown, and that's what you wanted to do, hope it work out for you. But let me know, okay? And I'm saying I don't wish the brothers no bad luck, but hey, man, one of the things old hustlers tell you when you start doing anything, he said, just remember, all money ain't good money now, okay? And sometimes people say, I'm running with so and so. He said, are you sure you want to do that? Because I don't know. Because that's a pretty cold-blooded crew, and you don't look like you really built for them, okay? And y'all go get busted, and somebody gonna have to go that down. My other thing is how do Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones and the other guy Rozier end up in a deal with the mafia, getting arrested in a mafia related thing? Is they must have owed them some. They must have owed them some money or something before this, because this how your ass ends up in situations like this. Because you can't tell them no. Because they don't come to ask you, do you want to volunteer? Okay, you get put in that situation because you did something you shouldn't have done with them ahead of that. Because that's how that shit happens. You know, we were talking about The Wire, and I think it was year 3. Could have been year with the kids in the grade school, and when Marlo wanted to give them some money for back to Brooks, and Chris came over to give everybody some money, and Mike didn't take the money, and Chris went back to tell Marlo, but he didn't want any. And Marlo came over to see him and said, "You know who I am?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't want the money?" Mike said, "I'm good." And all the kids, well, he said, Marlo said, "All right." And as the kids was walking away, Marlo says to Chris, watch him, because that puppy got big paws, okay? And sometimes you just got to be grown enough to say, nah, that's all right. I'll work this out for myself. I know y'all want to help me, but there's some help I'm going to pass on, because everything comes with a bill, and I don't, and you the kind of motherfucker I don't want to owe, okay? So I'll figure it out for myself. So, hey, the game is, as Marlo said, the game is the game, man. What you want me to say?
Or you can ask Senator Geary.
Yeah.
And that is a lesson that can be applied to everything, ladies and gentlemen.
Everything.
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 So we are going to wrap it up for the level set today on behalf of myself, the Mike Jones, Charles Alexander, Kwame, JT Christmas. We want to thank you all. And if it's the Lord's will, we shall see you very soon.